following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Welcome to Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz along with Dan Rylance, and we're very pleased to be joined this evening. We were supposed to have both of the victors from the primary race running for county executive. Jay Schrader had been invited. He was supposed to have been here. However, we've waited like an extra 15 minutes or so before we started taping here just to see if he'd come along, and we've not heard anything from him, and he's not here. So hopefully he didn't get into any accident or anything like that. But we are proceeding without him, and unfortunately with our taping schedule, there will not be another opportunity to have Mr. Schrader on. So, we're sorry about that. But we're pleased that Mark Harris is here tonight.
I'm glad to be here.
And so the empty chair is where Mr. Schrader would have been. And again, we hope that he's all right. So, Mark, you are seeking a second term. It's a 4-year term. Why do you want to do this again?
Well, I've actually had a pleasure in serving people as a county executive. There's been a lot to accomplish in difficult budget times, and I think I've done a pretty good job of it. We've managed to increase our investment in infrastructure. I've always proposed balanced budgets. We've managed to build up the reserves a little bit, and we're probably going to need those reserves to get through the next couple of difficult years, because remember, most of the county's money comes from the state and federal government. In addition to the balanced budgets and the reserves, the infrastructure for roads, we've also done some bridges, some culverts, Parkview Nursing Home. We've invested quite a bit in the University of Wisconsin Fox Valley, which is the county's responsibility, jointly with Outagamie County. And I think we've served the people well. We're doing the same job with 85 less employees than when I started. So we've had to become more efficient.
Well, that brings me up right away to one of the things that your opponent, Mr. Schrader, has said, and I'm not exactly sure where here he said it, but essentially he said that you should not be filling non-vital positions, and I've tried to follow this pretty closely, but you haven't filled non-vital positions in your 4 years in office, have you?
No, we've had a hiring freeze on since the day I started. Now, what that means is they can't just replace someone when someone retires or someone quits. They have to write a memo of why that position has to be filled. We sometimes challenge it, sometimes we accept that it has to be filled. This year already we've had a couple positions we haven't filled, where they've been vacated because we think we can either combine those job duties with other positions, or sometimes we just want to hold them empty for a period of months to see if we can get by with less staff. But we've tried to get as much attrition as we can, and I would say probably half of the 85 people were through attrition, where people retired or where they quit and we didn't fill their positions. However, the county's always been relatively lean compared to other counties. So you have to have adequate people, and a lot of our functions are emergency type functions or areas that the demand's going up, like in corrections. We have a higher jail population in tough economic times. Certainly economic support and the food share program, those all see tremendous increases during rough economic times. So it's a battle.
Okay. One other thing real quickly that he's mentioned it on certain forums, both on the internet and broadcast on television. He's also got it on a piece of literature that he's sending out. And I want to ask you about this, because if this in fact is accurate, then I think he does make a good point. It has to do with your pay raise. And he says, I'm just going to quote this. It says, "I pledge and affirm that I will not accept any pay raise while in office. In tough economic times, how could a public servant accept a 9% raise, which he has equates out to $7,700, while negotiating labor contracts and ask county employees to accept a 2 to 3% raise? It lacks credibility." Did you, in fact, accept a 9% pay raise?
I would say that's a half-truth. I mean, there is some truth to it. Basically, the board sets the wages for the county executive for the next 4 years, once every 4 years. They can't do it during my term. They have to do it before anyone files for running for the office. And what they did is they made an adjustment to the pay of $5,000. And they made similar adjustments for instance, the clerk, the sheriff, several of the elected offices where we had become much lower than neighboring counties. And then they gave me a 3% increase per year. What he's doing is he's focusing only on that first year and saying, if I take the 5,000 plus the 3%, you get that kind of raise.
Okay.
Well, there's another point to be made. That's his pay as well if he takes the job. You know, if he really finds a 9% pay increase that objectionable for that 1 year, you know, would he hold himself to 9%? I suspect it would be a 300 or 400% increase for him because he doesn't work outside the home. He may have some sort of home business, but this would be a significant increase from him. He says he won't take the raise. His wife's also a physician. That's kind of easy for him to say.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Another issue, might as well, as long as we're going this way, is the half-cent sales tax. In the League of Women Voters things, he said, you know, dramatically that under no circumstances would he, you know, and if it was passed by the board, he would veto it. Your response was, I don't want to do it, but I don't want to hold myself for the 4 years. Is that kind of your response?
I said I wouldn't take a 4-year pledge.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is, again, we depend on the federal government and the state government for a lot of our revenues.
Right.
There was a trial balloon floated at the state level that perhaps they would eliminate revenue sharing and give the counties additional county option sales tax to use.
Okay.
If that was the case, we would have to think hard about how we were going to operate. But clearly, with what the governor's budget contains, we only lost 1% of revenue sharing. There's no reason to propose a sales tax for next year. And I haven't proposed it in the last 2 years
I was just going to
either.
say, when's the last time you did propose it?
I proposed it for the 2006 and the 2007 budget years.
Okay.
But there's another misrepresentation there that's even more important. You know, he's throwing around different figures of how much increased taxes there would be. And again, it's sort of a half-truth because he's adding up his estimates of what the sales tax would be over 4 years. But he consistently leaves out what I had proposed. What I had proposed was adopting the 0.5% sales tax, the county keeping about 800,000 of the million that would come in from tourists and visitors. 800,000 was to go to the towns, villages, and cities on a $5 per capita basis to help them with their budgets. And the rest, about $7.5 million, was going to go to property tax relief. So when he suggests that people would pay these enormous amounts of additional taxes because of the sales tax, they would have paid a lot of additional sales tax, but for people who lived in the county, it would have largely been offset by cuts in property taxes. Now, you know, people can have different opinions about whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. But in truth, the people who actually own homes or farms within the county, by and large, would have seen a small decrease in the amount of tax they paid between those two, while the visitors and the tourists would have paid more. And remember, 60 counties already have this sales tax. Now, it's not a panacea. You can't deduct both property tax and sales tax on your federal tax return. So for most people, the sales tax wouldn't be deductible. But it does hit you a little bit at a time when you have money to spend. And those people who are under the most pressure do very little spending that would be subject to sales tax. Remember, medicine and groceries are excluded. So there's some truth to the things he says, but he clearly takes them to a level and kind of creates a deception with them.
You want to maybe follow up on the property tax relief per county, yeah?
Right,
Or the sales
because
tax.
now I was at the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance website this afternoon, and you know, the stuff that I saw looked at 49 counties, and you know, because one of the things that he has said in his response to the Northwestern online is that sales tax increases a majority of the time never lead to property tax relief. Well, actually, when you look at 49 counties that the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance, his source, looked at, 21 of them were getting some to more than some relief. Another 21 were possibly getting, they were unlikely to get some relief, and 7 were inconclusive. So the 21 that were unlikely, it's possible that they could get some. It's unlikely, though. But it didn't say that they definitely did not get any. But here, out of 49, you've got 21 that are for sure getting some, and another 7 that are inconclusive. So I don't know how a claim can be made that says a majority of the time it doesn't lead to property tax relief.
Well, and I think, too, you'd have to go back and look at the original proposals. Those counties that adopted it with a specific spending program in mind, let's say they adopted it to build a courthouse, there's probably a temptation when that's paid off, what's the next project they need? So those counties are probably doing more projects than they otherwise could. The question is, if they would have done them anyways, did that prevent the property taxes from going up? But that's not what I proposed. What I proposed, you know, that budget was considered in October. The budget I proposed actually would have cut the property taxes in the bill due the very next month in November. And the sales tax wouldn't have started until April. That's why the actual number for that first year was $9 million on the state's estimate of 12. But you also have to remember those are just state estimates. With the slowdown in the economy, the state's now estimating that a year's sales tax in this county would only yield about $10 million. So again, I think there is a legitimate argument as to whether people think it was good or bad. But he said so many times, well, why would you raise a $9 million tax to fill a $700,000 hole in the budget? Well, that's exactly what I was doing. I was taking the money, a portion of what would come in from tourists, to try and save 20 jobs. Remember, I was laying off or reducing 60 employees. And I gave the board 2 balanced versions of the budget, one that relied entirely on cuts. And that would require, see if I can get this right, an additional 40 people, because that was between wages and benefits about $50,000 apiece. So I was saying, no, that's not right. I was saying you had to lay off 40 people or you had to lay off 60 people.
It was a long time ago.
I know, it was a long time ago. So I was trying to save 20 of those positions.
Right.
But one budget balanced by laying off 60 people. The other budget only laid off 40 and adopted the sales tax. And the sales tax was what was being used to fill that hole if they didn't want to lay off all the people.
Another issue? Or do you want to stay with this one?
No.
At the League of Women Voters thing, another issue that Mr. Schrader raised was the lack of security in the courthouse. And maybe we should talk a little bit about that, because a few days after your appearance, the committee or a committee of the Judiciary and Publics met, agreed on Monday to sort of move forward. So maybe you can kind of tell us where this is at and you know, why has there been no move so far on security in the courthouse?
It's being submitted as a stimulus package project.
Okay.
I don't think it's likely to get funded because it doesn't neatly fit into any of the categories that are being proposed. But basically, the board itself had come up with this idea of what would be needed to have metal detectors and a staff there checking for weapons. And they were going to lock the other doors of the courthouse. But that's $1 million structural change to the building, and probably will require 2 full-time employees to man those metal detectors. If the detectors are there with no staffing, they won't work. Now, I think some lesser measures can be taken to provide adequate security. I think we can secure the other doors of the courthouse and give the employees identity cards that would allow them to enter from the other doors, but require the public to enter a single door. I think we should consider allowing the bailiffs to carry pepper spray. I'm not saying we'll do that, but it should be considered. And you do have a lot of armed sheriff deputies in there, because if prisoners are delivered, there's deputies that come with them. But you also have to keep the cost and the need in perspective. You know, we've never actually had an incident of someone using a weapon in the courthouse. It doesn't mean that it couldn't happen tomorrow, but there's probably equal threat at a number of other locations in the county. I would think in the human service area is probably the greatest threat, where the social workers sometimes have to take kids away. So it's a matter of balancing those things. I would like to see some measures taken for security, but I don't think you can always propose all this additional spending and then say that under no circumstances would you allow it, tax increases.
Right. Can't have it
You
both
can't have
ways.
it both ways.
Now, is the building also on historic register?
I don't know if it's on the historic register. It is a relatively historic building. It was
Okay.
actually built during the Depression.
Okay. If it was, then the construction modifications would be much more stringent. That was my point, and I don't know whether it
Yeah,
is now. But
for the $1 million, you get a new entryway with security without any significant addition of office space. So it's a very expensive cure if you go that route.
Well, and I've heard this, and not just from Mr. Schrader's stuff that he's submitted, but I've heard it from other people too, that there used to be a panic button that, a judge could push if there was a problem, and that would, attract more help. And allegedly this panic button was disengaged. Is that true, and if so, why?
Well, it's more complicated than that. I asked the facilities manager, when was this button disconnected and why? And apparently it was disconnected years ago when they eliminated the maintenance employee who used to work in the basement, because the button didn't go to security. The button went to a maintenance room in the basement of the
He'll
courthouse.
come up with a hammer.
Yeah, it signals someone to come up with a mop,
Yeah.
But it probably at one time was connected to the public safety building, but we're probably talking 15, 20 years ago. Now, why one of the judges would be told, here's your panic button, because it never would have brought a quick response from anywhere in the last, dozen years at least, maybe longer. They probably do need, I don't know why there couldn't be some sort of wireless button that would call 911 directly and signal them to send someone to the courthouse. But if they're not dispatched from the city, it probably would not be a lot of help.
Right. Well, I will say this, just from covering different trials and cases in the courthouse, when there's prisoners being brought in, you do have sheriff's deputies bringing them in, and they are, I think I've not ever seen one that's not been in handcuffs, and they take additional precautions when someone is highly dangerous. They're deemed very dangerous. And I mean, we all know that some of the greatest threats come in the family court with divorces and child custody. So, which brings me to my question about that, Mark. If there is a family court case going on, is there a bailiff or a deputy in close proximity if that gets out of hand?
There is a bailiff, but I've learned since then the bailiffs are largely clerical, and while many of them are ex-police officers, they're not the level of security that I initially thought, because I knew we had
population of bailiffs too, huh?
Yeah,
No disrespect,
and I knew we had all these bailiffs, and my past experience in other places was that a bailiff was kind of an armed guard that may have done some scheduling and coordinating, but largely was armed. That's not the case. So I think we ought to look at some things to give them a higher level of security. I'm not discounting that in any way, but I just don't know that I can come up with $1 million and then have the ongoing year after year payroll to have 2 sheriff's deputies, manning metal detectors in the entryway. I mean, now you're talking over $100,000 in payroll a year, and we are on tighter than tight budgets.
What approximately was it costing? Because we did try that for a short period of time.
I remember that. Yeah.
And again, that was before my time in office, but it was prohibitive. The current entryway splits in 2 directions, so you had to have 2 metal detectors and 2 guards, or block one half the hallway off.
And that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
You could exit only by the women's bathroom. You could exit only.
But apparently the people in the courthouse or someone, maybe my predecessor, decided that it was both too expensive and too inconvenient. And so once the fears of 911 passed, they just dropped that.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Let's talk about the stimulus package. I've listened to the governor and I've read reports. I still think there's a lot of things that aren't really pinned down right. Is that true? That, I mean, there's some.
It's
The
not.
specifics are not there.
Yeah, it's not clear what the whole process is going to be, whether there's going to be a political aspect to the process. Some in the State House are arguing that members of each party should be on some sort of committee. The single best place to submit projects is on the website. They formed a new department and brought in an external person. And that website has you use some drop boxes to establish the category that you're submitting the stimulus package in. But it's a little bit like winning the lottery when you put these projects in. When they finally decide who gets funded and who doesn't, I suspect the total of the projects submitted will be so great relative to the money available.
Well, we saw that with the city announcement of asking for a lot.
Yeah.
All right, let's get back there. But you lose 1% in shared revenue. How much is that for the county?
I'm going to have to guess it's about $30,000, maybe
Okay.
$30,000 to $35,000.
Okay.
We get our shared revenue in two amounts,
Okay.
and there's also some monies that it's not clear if they count them as shared revenue. There's like some what they call computer aids and things. So it's not exactly clear, but that's a relatively small amount of money.
That's pretty painless compared to the 5% that was being talked about.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I had a real fear that we might lose all of our revenue sharing and be given some sort of revenue alternative to make it up, which would be the worst of both worlds from my perspective.
Based on what you know now about the multiple choice on projects and stuff, what do you think you have the best chance for the county to get stimulus money for, and what would you go for?
Yeah, there's two projects I think I've got a good shot at. One is that we have more landfill gas than we're currently using in the generators, and if you have too much gas, you've got to vend it.
Okay.
You can't store it indefinitely because there's an explosion risk. We want another big generator to convert landfill gas to electricity, and that fits under this green energy or renewable energy category. I think and we're ready to go on that. So I think that's a real good shot.
Okay. What's the price tag on something like that?
A little over $1 million.
All right.
The second item is that University of Wisconsin Fox Valley bought a manufacturing facility that was adjacent to their property because it came up for sale. And they want to expand an engineering program that's run there through Platteville. And they can't occupy all of the building until they get an ADA compliant elevator and stairwell added. And so this has an education component. It complies with the ADA, and it
That's the
eventually
American
will.
for Disability Act.
Yeah, and it'll eventually be training more civil engineers and mechanical engineers, which are jobs that generally are in demand, although I don't know how strong that demand is right at this time. But that meets a lot of criteria, and I think that one has a good chance as well. We also have a shovel-ready road project improving County M from Pickett to the county line. It's the only road project we had where the engineering was already completed, and they seem to want road projects that you could go on tomorrow if they gave you the money. Those are the best chances.
Okay. We're chatting with County Executive Mark Harris, who's seeking his second term. And I will just remind you, in case you didn't hear at the opening of the show, that his opponent, Jay Schrader, had been invited and for some reason, we're not sure why, was unable to be here tonight. We haven't heard anything from him. So hence the empty chair and his name still appearing on the screen. Mark, I want to talk just a little bit. It has nothing really to do with your candidacy, but I thought this was some good news. We're taping this on the 19th of February, and I believe it was last night the state legislature approved, with not one single Republican vote, a whole package of stuff that includes combined reporting.
Yes.
And that is a good thing. And the statistics that I saw were it's projected to bring in about $215 million by mid-2011, which is just a little over 2 years from now. And for folks who don't know, that, of course, is closing the combined reporting, closes the tax loopholes that we've been talking about for well over
This
a
has
year,
been
I
Cheryl's
think.
campaign plank
It has
for a
been.
couple of years.
Well, you know, that tiny organization, the Institute for Wisconsin's
They've been
Future,
on
They've
the
been on the show.
you know, that's a very small group of people, and they've worked hard at trying to get an honest discussion of some of these things. And the combined accounting will prevent the type of abuses where companies set up a P.O. box or a small office with 1 or 2 people and then have transactions within their company that shift all the profits to Nevada where there's no state tax. They also were instrumental in closing the Walmart loophole, and they helped us enormously on that loophole that the paper companies were
I
jumping
remember
through,
that.
the Newark exception. So they've been a good group. I think it makes sense for closing loopholes to be part of the mix. I'd like them to share some of the additional revenues with those businesses that have been paying their taxes and some with the state for its budget. But certainly it doesn't make sense for someone who's making good profits here in Wisconsin to pay no taxes in Wisconsin, and that was an all too frequent occurrence.
Sure. Well, I was delighted to hear that, and frankly, when they were here, you know, they said it was going to take a long time,
Right.
they thought, and so I was surprised at how quickly this went. And of course, there's other things to raise some taxes. You know, downloads of music and things like that are going to have a small tax associated with them, stuff like that. But if you don't do those things, then you're not going to, you know, have any additional taxes.
Can I
So-
jump back to the pay raise for just a second?
Sure, go right
There was
ahead.
another point I wanted to make, and that raise is a large raise. It looks more reasonable if you look at the full 4 years, but it's still large, and I understand that. But I don't make that decision. It's not something I request. But I think one of the reasons the board would do that is we did look at some data on compensation for county administrators and executives, and I'm the lowest paid county executive in Wisconsin, but there's not a lot of county executives. But if you take by valuation and rank the counties from 6 larger than our county and 6 smaller than our county, so you go from La Crosse to Green Bay, I was the lowest, and depending on what Green Bay did with their compensation, I will still be the lowest. And in fact was about $25,000 behind the group. Now, that's not a complete justification,
Sure.
I understand that, but it's not like I'm a highly paid executive.
Sure. What do you make?
This past year, my W-2 showed less than 80,000. I think the rate as of April was 82, but you know my pay changes in April, so you never get the full benefit.
Mark, you've got a website, right?
Yes,
Okay. Why don't you tell us what that is?
it's harris4exec.com, and that 4 is the number 4.
Okay. Harris4exec.com. There
That's
we go.
correct.
Okay. All right, very good. Well, listen, thanks so much for being here.
Yes.
And, you
Thank
know,
you.
we're sorry that Mr. Schrader couldn't be here, but we're glad that you were anyway. So,
Well-
and best of luck on April 7th.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the invitation.
We're going to take a very short break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by 2 of the organizers of the group who is trying to stop the deer killing of the quarry deer here in Oshkosh. We'll be right back.
Well, I finally have some time off, so I'm writing to tell you that I'm doing well. We have good days and bad days over here. We try to remember the good ones and get through the bad ones. Mostly we have each other, and that's what keeps us going. And Mom, since you asked, if anyone wants to help, just tell them to contact the USO. You can't believe how much they do for us. With love, your son, Michael.
Every year, the U.S. Department of the Treasury receives about 1.4 million reports of problems with paper checks. Checks can be lost, stolen, or delayed. If you still receive Social Security payments by paper check, Treasury wants you to know about a safer, more convenient way to get your money. The Direct Express Prepaid Debit MasterCard. The Direct Express card is new and is available to anyone receiving Social Security benefits, even if you don't have a bank account. Your monthly benefits will be automatically placed onto your card account each month on the day your money is due. While other debit cards cost money, it is possible to use the Direct Express card for free to make purchases, pay bills, and get cash at thousands of locations nationwide. There are no sign-up or monthly account fees. No more waiting for the mail or worrying about lost or stolen checks. Call 1-877-212-9991 or visit www.usdirectexpress.com.
We were in an emergency situation. We don't have extra. We have a little bit of water and a little bit of food. A meeting place, no.
No.
I don't think we have a first aid kit.
We have tuna fish, we have beans, we have canned tomatoes,
True.
you know.
That's true, but that's really not survival food. Tomato paste.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And welcome back to the second half of Fi on Oshkosh show. We're joined now by Jean Vesperman, is it? Yes. Okay, and Amy Haberkorn?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. And you guys are two of the organizers, maybe you're the only two organizers of the, basically the Save the Quarry Deer group here in town. And we want to thank you very much for being here tonight, taking time out of your evening to come and talk about your efforts. Why is this so important to the two of you? I mean, Amy, you've kind of articulated this at city council meetings a number of times, and I think you've probably been quoted in the paper, but for viewers who may not have seen the council meeting or whatever, why is this so important to each of you to save these deer?
Well, and for me, it was mostly because of the lack of regard that the city council had for the rest of the citizens and their feelings on the issue. It started out obviously as a concern for the deer, and was this a valid reason to actually kill these deer? And the more I investigated it, I felt that it wasn't. And then when I found out the numbers of the survey, it staggered me that the majority of the people in the affected area didn't want this to happen, and that the rest of the city, who truly will be involved in this because there's other deer populations in the city, weren't asked at all what their opinion was. And to me, that was of great concern in many issues, not just with deer, but in anything that might be of concern to you as a citizen, but they didn't care enough to listen.
Sure. And Jean, there's kind of a little interesting story about how you got involved with this. You knew nothing about it, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've only just picked up on most of the information within the last couple of months. You know, it was kind of in the background while, you know, have a rather busy schedule, but, you know, I finally, you know, kind of followed a little bit of it until actually one day I happened to be driving by when they were doing the first culling, and saw the protesters out there, and, you know, I honked my horn too and made a few rounds as well to show that I supported them. And, you know, just seeing the kids out there with their homemade signs and, you know, protesting against the deer culling, or the slaughter, we'll say. And it just prompted me to do some research and, you know, at least delve a little bit deeper and, you know, find out what the facts were.
Okay, well, why don't we talk a little bit about the group that you have helped organize. How many members do you have?
Oh, we have, last count, over 700.
On your Facebook account,
on the
right?
Facebook account. I can't even tell you how many more just in our group. You know, at different meetings we have different numbers, but a huge support, and there's so many more out in the community. If you read the letters to the editor a week ago Sunday, when they just berated the council for doing what they're doing, those are names I've never heard of. So I know there's so many more people I work with who aren't part of our group. Same thing. I mean, when it came to signing the surveys, or I'm sorry, not to the petitions. Yeah, the petitions. Those people didn't show up at the meetings, but they certainly are opposed to this.
Now, I know on the internet it's always hard to tell if people are locally based. Do you have some sense of how many of those 700 people may be outside of the area, where they just, you know, they Google this somehow, or they hear about it, and they really don't have a vested interest in the community? They just have an interest in the fact that deer should not be slaughtered like this?
I don't think we have any true figures as far as you know, how many are local and how many are not. I guess the main point is that these people have an interest, and they also want to help and provide support for us as well, whether it's helping gathering information, giving us some inside information, outside information, you name it.
Okay.
I want to get a little bit more to get where you're coming from. Is this the only issue of life that you people are concerned with? Do you have other issues? I mean, why does this one come to the top? Or maybe it doesn't, maybe you have others.
I think that's a good question because as I delved into this, and I can't say that I have a complete check of all the data that they have here, but just in the last few weeks or so of my research, it's kind of raised a rather large concern because it seems like, first of all, again, we have a survey that was conducted, and the majority of the people that are answering the survey were saying, no, we don't want to have any action to be done. The other thing is digging further. It's just a matter of I'm more of a data person, and so I want to see the facts.
At the council meeting when you
introduced
yourself.
I mean, yeah. Granted, I ran out of time too.
That's all right.
And, I guess the main thing, what it really comes down to, is what was their basis for making their decision to get this far already and that fast? Because it doesn't seem like the landowners may have rigorously tried the methods, the non-lethal methods, to keep the deer out. I question as far as the basis for their criteria for decision making, because what was their criteria to say, okay, this is not working, now we need to go to the next step of lethal means? So
I understand the process issue, what you got up, but what I was trying to get at was, and maybe I didn't ask it very well, is are there other life issues other than saving deer that are important? What about sturgeons? This is Sturgeon Week.
Well, and you know, I think that's an important. I think that's an important issue because we've had people throw names like PETA freaks out there, things like that. I know, I'm speaking just for myself, but I made it very clear from the beginning that I was raised in a hunting family. I'm not opposed to hunting. I'd be one of the very first people out there if these deer were suffering, starving to death, to beg somebody to please put them out of their misery. So this is not a just protect the animal thing. It was more looking at the data, looking at the survey.
Back to the process thing that he's talking about.
Exactly, that it just, the decision making was flawed terribly.
Okay, I understand that. We've been listening to ideas about the rights of neighbors and neighborhoods on this show for the last year. So my next question, to get in a little bit, don't you think people in a specific neighborhood have some rights as opposed to people? I assume neither of you live in this neighborhood where they're culling the deer.
No.
Do you think, that weakens your argument a little bit, that you're not in the affected area?
I would agree if the majority of the neighbors were affected by it and the majority of the neighbors wanted things done. But you have to remember, there was 7 people. 7. That's it. That's not a lot of people. And like Jean had mentioned, nobody went out to see what they were doing to try to prevent this problem. Didn't even go through a full growing season. There weren't before and after pictures. There was nothing that told them that the next step should be. And in fact, I think the police department actually kind of got off topic of landscaping and started making a safety issue out of it, because I think they realized that that was not going to be the key issue anymore. There wasn't enough people angry. And then when it got onto the safety issue, we were led to believe things that we found out were not true. And in fact, the number of car deer accidents declined over a 3-year period. There was 6 car deer accidents in that area in 2006, 4 in 2007, and only 2 in 2008.
Now there's another one now.
I know, we had one. It doesn't have this bigger. And the first one I ever remember seeing in the paper, I got to say. So ironic, huh?
Yeah, it really was.
It was.
I thought of that.
When
I read it in yesterday's
Go
paper,
figure.
I thought, wow.
Well, I also think that, to kind of add to what Amy was saying, I believe we have just a deer management problem. And it's not just with this one particular area, because we do have deer in many other parts of the city. And I don't see what harm it would do if we took a step back and said, okay, we've got really just more than just this one area. We have an entire deer management problem, and maybe we should examine this whole thing all over again and just say, okay, how are we going to deal with this in other areas of the city, not just this city? And I can sympathize with the landowners. Granted, there's a lot of hard work as far as gardening. I'm an avid gardener myself. It's frustrating to have your plants eaten. However, you can make better plant choices that are not candy to the deer, so to speak. And it's a matter of patience as well. And I think it's unfortunate because this society, if you ask me, has been more of an instant gratification society where they want it now, they want their solution now, and they don't sit back and have the patience to take the time to see the solution actually come to an end.
And then they want somebody else to fix it for them.
Well, you know, my frustration with this is on a couple of different levels. I mean, number one, if they're doing this because of damage to people's landscaping and gardens and so forth, fine. What about all the damage done by rabbits, which is far more widespread? And I know you guys have heard this before.
Oh, yes.
I've
Other
seen
people
it
have
personally.
brought it up too. I mean, they've destroyed many shrubs in my yard.
Mine too.
You know, now do we all march up to City Hall chambers and say, we demand that you do something?
Apparently, we would have that right, and I'm assuming that they
But
would
they
take us
wouldn't-
seriously, right?
Oh, yeah, right.
And I also
But
thought,
you know-
gee, it would be a great idea. Maybe they can get the sharpshooters to sit on my back deck and peg off a few rabbits out of my yard too.
Well, absolutely, you know, and then my other frustration is that, you know, supposedly now they can't be, these deer can't be relocated because of the potential for chronic wasting disease, but you're donating the meat to food pantries, and you're not testing the deer to see if they have chronic wasting disease.
Well, they say that here's the catch-22 is they won't even consider relocating them because of the possibility of chronic wasting disease, which they know there has never been a reported case of it anywhere in Winnebago County. And they say that even if it had chronic wasting disease, it would be safe for human consumption, so they can go ahead and they can donate it. But then the catch-22 is that they're going to plan on testing for chronic wasting disease, but not till 2010. So obviously they don't think there's any around, or they wouldn't be waiting till 2010. And it's just a big circle that just really doesn't make any sense.
Well, I don't think that real clear answers are being given.
They're not.
I agree.
You know, and that's, I guess, my third frustration with the whole thing. And I agree with Councilman Palmieri, and he's the only one on that 7-person council who voted against this.
And did you see the poll numbers? The people who voted for him geographically, where they were from that affected area. Then most of them that voted for him, or his highest percentage, were from that affected area.
Well, that's interesting that they should come from that area.
Exactly.
So,
Doesn't that tell you something? I think the 2 mayors who are running head-to-head may want to think about that as well.
well, I don't think we're going to see either one of them change their position on this.
Yeah, unfortunately.
you know.
That's frustrating.
That is frustrating.
So
It is.
what do you guys do from here? What are the steps that you're doing as an organized group and with organized efforts? What do you do?
What can you do?
Well,
the contract
it's-
is till the end of 2009.
It is, but it can be broken by either party at any time.
But how are you going to get into the game to break it?
You know, I'm personally hoping for a little bit of common sense. First of all, they said that they could kill up to 40 deer, right? Now, we got the best of the best out there. And in 2 killings,
Right.
they managed to get 3 deer each time. The first time, one of them was a fawn. In the second killing, one of them was an injured animal with a piece of, or injured deer with a piece of fencing around its neck. So you have the best of the best who, even though they swear there's 40-some plus deer out there, could only manage to get 6 of them. I think they may be finding out that it's not as big of an issue. Plus, if you look at the car deer accident statistics, it's not as severe either.
Where are you going to get the change?
Well,
You got all these signatures.
Yeah.
You got, but seriously, you know, you can protest all you want, and you're doing a good job at it. But where do you go from here?
Well, I think we have a couple of options. I actually see about 3 different possibilities here. One is to actually open more of a dialogue with the landowners and just say, look, let's meet, let's bring in some experts. I mean, if the city can't do it, maybe we can come up with a solution ourselves. Certainly, I mean, as we saw at their council meeting, you know, Amy was up there along with the previous landowner, and I mean, they seem to have come to some sort of a agreement as far as, you know, trying something, and you know, there's a sharing going on. So that's one possibility. Another possibility, obviously, I mean, we could certainly try the referendum issue. It's going to be a rather hard-fought road to get the
Force a
legalese and to force a referendum for the city to actually terminate the contract and at least take a step back and look at the deer management problem.
Your time is very, very short to
Exactly.
get it on the April 7th ballot. In fact, the clock is halfway
I
done.
know.
Exactly.
Yeah, it'd be
It's hard
tough.
to get people to return phone calls when they're not interested.
But I hear you.
Things
That's an answer to my question. That
Do you
would be.
know offhand how long
That's
they'd have to get that on the ballot?
You got to have it in X number of days before the election, and I think it's at least 2 or 3 weeks. I'm guessing here. So you probably got 3 weeks in March
Well,
at most.
We have a lot of work ahead of us,
Yeah.
don't we?
So then we got the option 3, of course, is the democratic process. We vote for our leaders that are going to support us.
So you're going to single issue candidates?
Excuse me?
You're going to single issue candidates?
If need be.
Well,
You're only
you
going to
know,
vote for someone or against someone if they're with you on this issue?
No, because it's not a deer issue. See, that's just it. If you take the deer out of the equation and you insert your topic of importance in there, the council has basically said, we asked your opinion, you told us what you wanted,
Right.
and we chose to absolutely disregard everything you said.
Okay.
So if it were an issue with, repairing your streets or street lighting or what's being built in your neighborhood, do you want the people that are put into place to do what's best for you to
Okay.
say, we really could care less what you want? And I don't think the constituents of Oshkosh want that.
And
so
we did
it's not
see
a
that.
deer
Yeah,
issue.
yeah.
Yeah, we did see that with the sidewalks over in
Right.
the River Mill
Ex-
subdivision.
Exactly.
And I'm
exactly.
grateful that I got at least interested in this topic because it did, cause me to explore what's going on with our city government and how it works, those sort of things. And, it's actually got me, asking some more questions about other issues.
Okay, good.
One other thing on the contract, and I'll get off the contract, but it is what we're dealing with here. The city promises to keep you informed of, and the media, of what's going on. I hear you people saying, even Cheryl saying, that that's not being met to some extent. So that could potentially be a violation of the contract,
Well,
because
we've
that
had-
is promised in the contract.
We've had violations of the contract. When the city council met, they approved the culling of 40 antlerless deer. And if you read this, nowhere in here does it say antlerless. Now, Tony Palmieri brought up in the January meeting when they were voting to approve shooting within the city limits, he said, we voted to allow the culling of up to 40 antlerless deer. Our contract doesn't say that. And everybody said, oh, no, we're not going to take the time to revise this. We're not going to insult the urban wildlife specialist by having them change it. So now all of a sudden there's nothing that says that they can't shoot buck if they want to.
It says up to 40 deer, you're
Up
correct.
to 40 deer.
That's
But
it.
that's not what the city council approved. They approved 40 antlerless deer.
They have also said that they're doing a thinning of the herd, and this was pointed out at the last council meeting as well, that if they have tags to kill up to 40 deer, and that's right about the number of deer that have supposedly been seen, that number and under, then that would suggest, I think, pretty clearly that they're trying to eliminate the herd.
They could wipe
rather than-
they could wipe the
rather
whole
than
herd
thinning
out.
it.
Yes.
Well, and what I wish the neighbors, if they would just think logically, and I do have a lot of compassion for them, and like Jean was saying, it's my hope that we can work together as a community, because right now we're being divided, and that's a horrible, horrible thing. There are so many people who want to try to help raise money to maybe do something else with the deer. The Vulcan Quarry is awesome in their protection of it. Maybe we can work with them. Working with the neighbors would be a great thing. But what we're doing right now just simply isn't working, and I think we need to try to bring everybody together on all of this.
Well, there was a woman, and Jean, you mentioned her at the last council meeting, who did speak just before you did, Amy.
Right.
And, it almost brought tears to my eyes, because this woman was tearing up as well, as you know. She was all for this, and when she started talking with you, she found out some of these other things that you can put on your shrubbery to deter the deer, and that kind of thing. And she had her mind opened, and her heart was in the right place, and she's willing to work with you guys to try and employ some of these other methods and see if they work. And isn't it nice that people can have they can be on diametrically opposed
Absolutely.
sides of the aisle, and yet they can find a way to come together.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't seem like the city council, they can say all day long that they've tried other things, but I don't think they've given it enough time.
Yes.
And to really see if the other methods would have worked.
You're correct.
And their minds and hearts are closed, as far as I'm concerned.
And I have to tell you, we were out of town, but while we were out of town, and I just got the message this morning, she's already contacted me. She contacted me quite a few days ago, and the message was left by the person retrieving our messages. But and I think that that's a huge step, and it's not that she doesn't think that the deer are a problem. They still are, but she's saying to me, listen, if you can help me, I'm willing to let you help me, and I'm willing to help her. I told the city council in December that I would volunteer my time, I would volunteer product, I would go into the neighbors. This particular woman you're speaking about, she said she has issues with her hands and arthritis. I told her to come spray for her. It's not that big of a deal. It truly isn't.
So tell us, Amy, what is this product? It's a spray then that you spray on the shrubs?
I mean, there's many products out
Sure.
there. There's
Okay.
a liquid fence that works great, and people say it's expensive. I make one in my kitchen. I've been using it for 12 years. I know some of the authorities think that you have to change your product every so often. I've been using the exact same thing for 12 years, and I plant hostas and patience. I mean, cream of the crop for the deer. I do live in a heavily wooded area, so maybe they can find other things to eat, but I think if given the choice between some underbrush and an impatient, they would certainly choose the impatient, and yet they touch nothing. It's persistence.
I was also at the Garden Expo in Madison this last weekend, and I asked several vendors and people out there, what do you do? Certainly there's like a combination of like home remedies, like so many egg whites plus egg beaters plus actually a little bit of habanero sauce in there, and spray that on. But that has to do several applications. But I mean, not to do a product endorsement, but there's a plant or something called Plant Sky DD. A gentleman was telling me that they only had to apply it twice every 6 months, and it had no problems with like rain or snow or anything like that as far as the product getting removed from the plant.
Okay.
Issue of deer starving. Are deer starving in that area? Do you have any evidence one way or the other in that?
They did find one deer that was seemed to have starved.
Okay.
Whether it was a sick deer that starved, whether it was an elderly deer that starved, there doesn't seem to be any indication. And from what we can see when we drive by, they certainly are thinner this time of year. All deer are, but they don't seem to be starving.
And there's always going to be the outliers out there that there's going to, somebody's always going to find maybe 1 deer, 2 deer here or there. Personally, I've drove by the area several times. I've counted, more than what they thought, which their initial count was 11. I've counted like 16 to 18 deer out there. The deer I've seen, and I'm an ex-hunter, all the deer look rather well fed, doing real well. I didn't see anybody emaciated, none of that.
Yeah, that would be a concern. It really would. One thing too with the neighbors is that if they thin the herd, I'm not sure what would make them think. Let's say there's 40 deer and they take out 20. What would make them think that the balance of the 20 wouldn't eat their yard just as much as the original 20 did? I mean, 1 deer can take out your flower beds while you're sleeping. And I also had the opportunity to see many of the photographs that were sent to the city council people in the previous year. And having been gardening for so many years, and really gardening is my life, the majority of that damage, the vast majority, I would say 90% was done by rabbits, not by deer. I mean, deer do not lay on the ground and eat from the bottom up a few inches. They'll stand at the top and eat down.
Well, the rabbits are just horrible.
They are.
I mean,
They are.
they really are, and it seems to be getting worse each year.
They are, yeah.
And that's why this argument about, well, we've got to protect these people's landscaping is a bunch of phooey as far as I'm concerned. I mean, maybe that's their feel-good politics, but when you look at the bigger picture and the destruction by rabbits, and rabbits multiply much faster than deer.
And the damage also, I mean, not only inflicted upon the plant life, but also like their droppings. For instance, I mean, I have a dog at home. Unfortunately, he eats, sometimes the rabbit droppings. It is giving him worms. Granted, they're treatable and everything like that, but still, I mean, they're talking about other possible diseases and so forth from the deer. I mean, the rabbits are just as bad. I mean, they're infested with fleas. They have diseases themselves. So I think you know, we have more of a major rabbit problem than we do a deer problem.
Can I say something about the rabbits?
Go ahead.
Yes.
I could give you a long list of people in town who are eradicating rabbits, both by traps and by 22s. So it is going on. I don't think you want that process
No, of
with the
course
deer.
not. Right.
You don't want people going around shooting deer. But you know, you'd be surprised, maybe not, that there is a rabbit eradication going on by individual homeowners in this
Oh,
town.
I'm sure there
Yeah.
is, yeah, the frustration of them.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note, too, that in the communities across the country where culling has been going on, they've found that, of course, there's an immediate reduction in numbers, but they come back every single year. It doesn't solve anything. You know, that's statistics you can read absolutely everywhere. It just kind of curbs it for the time being, so they're not going to get rid of it.
Right.
And the majority of us like living here because of the surroundings, because we have the wildlife. So I guess our point as a group is that we really want to learn to work with the neighbors and try to put everybody at peace. And it is frustrating, but it's frustrating living next to an airport and listening to airplanes, and it's frustrating living next to a railroad track and listening to
Cheryl,
trains.
maybe we should extend an invitation if we did this again, that we could have one, if you get together with, we could maybe have two people here and maybe talk about some agreement. I mean, we've had people who are opposed to it, and we've had people at Ford, and maybe, you know, the invitation would be open that, you know, let's see if we can move further with that.
Sure.
You know, and we had hoped that maybe the city, too, could help out. You know, if they have garden centers, if they could help out maybe by bringing in plants and offering at a reduced price to the people in that area. Also educating the garden centers, one of which we called, and they said arborvitae was a deer-resistant plant, and it is the furthest thing from deer-resistant there is. They love arborvitae.
They don't grow back.
No, it takes them. They do, but sometimes they're
fencing,
not
you know,
very well.
It could even be, you know, something with helping people with fencing. You know, maybe
Sure.
some sort of a tax break or whatever,
exactly.
you know, that would, you know, help get
Yeah.
a better style of fence, a higher fence. Granted, you know, you're still going to have deer. I think, again, it's the deer management problem, not just for the area, but for the whole city. Somebody needs to come up with something that's a concise plan to say this is how we're going to handle our deer problem.
And I want to start a deer management committee, a citizens deer management committee, so that we can go around and talk to each other and find out what the concerns are, bring it back to the powers that be.
Okay. Very quickly, how can folks reach you if they're interested in joining your group or becoming involved in some way?
You mean
Do you have
as
a
far as-
website or anything? Or?
Well, we have a Facebook
The
group.
Facebook page.
We do.
Save the Quarry Deer, Save the Oshkosh Quarry Deer, I believe. or-
Either way, you're going to
If you Google
find
it,
it.
you'll find
If you
it.
go Deer Oshkosh, you're going to find it.
Okay. And phone numbers, do you want to give out phone numbers, or would you prefer that they just...
Mine is so out there by now, I'm fine with that.
Go ahead.
Mine is 426-3180.
Okay, all right, very good. Thanks to both of you for
You're
being
welcome.
here
Thanks for
tonight.
coming
and,
out.
Hope it
and,
helps.
Thanks for
hopefully
having
things
us.
will move in the right direction,
Yeah.
and we'll have you back again at some point if it doesn't. So,
Yeah, thank you
and
so
also
much.
thanks to Mark Harris for being here in the first half. That's going to do it for us, so we'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.